Hey everyone, Brian here, wishing you a wonderful Monday and a great week ahead. For those watching this video, it's part of a long series in which we're looking at Scripture as an insight for us to comprehend our own soulfulness. We've been saying all along that Scripture can be seen as the story of the people of God. It can be seen as a moral guide or a general guide about how to live well with other people. And it can be a source of theological reflection, doctrine, how to worship, etc., etc. And in this series, we've said it is all of those things. But the church talks about all of those sometimes so that we know them pretty well. What the church hasn't spoken so much about is the voice of the soul. And that's because the voice of the soul can be tricky to hear. It doesn't fit into nice, neat categories. But it's very alive within each one of us. And it's my belief that you can look at these same scriptural passages that we believe, for example, teaches us good moral attitudes and orientations to life, kind of as an external guide to how to live, and still see in those, while they may be teaching that at one level, an insight and education about the nature of the soul. So right now we're looking at the book of Proverbs, which couldn't perhaps be more obviously about how to live externally, and yet we're looking at it and saying, what can it tell us interiorly? So I'm now just going to read to you chapter 6. We just finished chapter 5 last week. So here is the whole of chapter 6. I'm reading it from the New Revised Standard Version of the Bible, which is the same Bible that we read in church. There are other translations, and in some cases it makes things a little clearer than this language, but this is our Episcopal Church language, and we'll hear it. So first I want you to hear it. As you're hearing it, imagine on the one hand that you're an early Puritan preacher who's grabbing onto this stuff and is really trying to create a holy community in these early puritanical towns. And so you're looking to the book of Proverbs to teach you how to live. But as we learned last week, and really since we've started this series, what is it like to hear these same words, and instead of seeing them as underscoring a dualistic way of being, you're either with God or against God, you're either being good or bad, you're either being attentive to the divine will or you're a sinner, those are all dualities. What if, as the voice of the soul is, it's a unity, that we're seeing the way things are and trying to learn to live into the nature of what it means to be a human being, experiencing life, not only physically, not only through our social life, our intellectual life, our emotional life, but also including in that the voice of our soul. And the voice of the soul is never dualistic. It is always embrace life, embrace the truth of life, embrace the wholeness of life. I can't help but think, when we talk about this kind of thing, of people like Eckhart Tolle, for example, who is not speaking about this particular part of how to live life from a Christian point of view, but from his observation and experience of what it means to be a human being on the path to enlightenment. And he's very clear that we should be present to the experience we're having right now, and to actually experience it, whatever that may be, but also at the exact same time to be able to be what we in Christianity call dispassionate enough to observe myself experiencing a situation. So there's an actual situation, there's me in that situation, and then there's me standing back and allowing the soul to say, oh, look at me and look at this situation, and how might the true divine rhythm be in this. So here's chapter 6, from the book of Proverbs. My child, if you have given your pledge to your neighbor, if you have bound yourself to another, you are snared by the utterance of your lips, caught by the words of your mouth. So do this, my child, and save yourself, for you have come into your neighbor's power. Go, hurry, and plead with your neighbor. Give your eyes no sleep, and your eyelids no slumber. Save yourself like a gazelle from the hunter, like a bird from the hand of the fowler. Go to the ant, you lazy bones. Consider its way, and be wise without having any chief or officer or ruler. It prepares its food in summer and gathers its sustenance in harvest. How long will you lie there, O lazy bones? When will you rise from your sleep? A little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to rest, and poverty will come upon you like a robber, and want like an armed warrior. A scoundrel and a villain goes around with crooked speech, winking the eyes, shuffling the feet, pointing the fingers with perverted mind, devising evil, continually sowing discord. On such a one, calamity will descend suddenly, in a moment, damage beyond repair. There are 6 things that the Lord hates, 7 that are abominations to him: haughty eyes, a lying tongue, and hands that shed innocent blood, a heart that devises wicked plans, feet that hurry to run to evil, a lying witness who testifies falsely, and one who sows discord in a family. My child, keep your father's commandment and do not forsake your mother's teaching. Bind them upon your heart always, tie them around your neck. When you walk, they will lead you. When you lie down, they will watch over you. When you awake, they will talk with you. For the commandment is a lamp and a teaching light, and the reproofs of discipline are the way of life. To preserve you from the wife of another, from the smooth tongue of the adulteress. Do not desire her beauty in your heart. Do not let her capture you with her eyelashes. For a prostitute's fee is only a loaf of bread, but the wife of another stalks a man's very life. Can fire be carried in the bosom without burning one's clothes? Or can one walk on hot coals without scorching the feet? So is he who sleeps with his neighbor's wife. No one who touches her will go unpunished. Thieves are not despised who steal only to satisfy their appetite when they are hungry. Yet if they are caught, they will pay 7-fold. They will forfeit all the goods of their house. But he who commits adultery has no sense. He who does it destroys himself. He will get wounds and dishonor, and his disgrace will not be wiped away. For jealousy arouses a husband's fury, and he shows no restraint when he takes revenge. He will accept no compensation and refuses a bribe, to no matter how great. So again, you can imagine how the sort of evangelical preacher could take hold of these. There's lots of stuff in here that's supposed to be about the wisdom of how to live your life. So for example, if you find yourself the first one is, if you find yourself in a position of owing your neighbor, get out of that debt just as fast as you can. If you find that you are becoming at all lazy, get over that laziness and get back to work. Never, ever, ever get involved in dealings in the world with sneakiness or sleaziness. It's just no way to interact with others. Then there's these 7 things that God abhors, and it sums all these up. It all has to do with being, in some way, dishonest with oneself, dishonest with others, and obviously dishonest with God. The other one is honoring family ties. And while the author of Proverbs is very opposed to men's, you can, by the way, sorry ladies, this is all written for men and from a man's point of view. But thankfully, the soulfulness speaks to us all. That, you know, if you go to a prostitute, that's bad enough. But if you are ignoring your vows, but then the vows of another man, and if you are taking a wife of another man, there's really nothing kind of worse than that, even thievery. And then finally, it's about if you go astray, the husband will always, with another man's wife, the jealousy and fury of the husband will always catch up with you. Now you can imagine that any one of these could be the basis of an entire sermon on how to live the moral life. And you could certainly take one of them and find all sorts of other passages in Scripture that would nurture and support this idea that, for example, if you have to take a loan from somebody, you should be as absolutely fast as possible to get out from underneath that loan. That you should live your own life responsibly and not be beholden to others, which is really kind of the whole thing of chapter 6. And you can go through all of Scripture and find all sorts of passages, both in the Jewish scriptures and in the Christian New Testament, that will reinforce that. And I'm quite sure that lots of sermons are based on this. And, you know, fine. But the reality is that God is God of the virtuous and the wicked. And that many of the stories of Jesus are really trying to point that out. So as I said at the beginning, what happens if we're not looking for duality in this? What if we're looking for the ways in which God is opening up wisdom to us about the way our soul works? Then we look, instead of looking at the behavior, we're looking at what the author of the book of Proverbs is saying about the results of this behavior. What happens when you end up feeling oppressed as a debtor? What happens when you discover that you've been, in order to try to make life simpler for yourself, you've told a lie, and now the lie is coming home to roost? What happens if you have gotten caught up in an affair that lasted a certain amount of time, but it did break all sorts of other relationships and other trusting combinations or commitments you had in the world, whatever that may be. This is what the chapter sort of ends with. Can fire be carried in the bosom without burning one's clothes? What the author is really talking about is what is it like to bear, let's just go back over them, the 7 things that God hates. What is it like to have haughty eyes or a lying tongue? What is it like to have bullied somebody? They say hands that shed innocent blood. What is it like to have joined a kind of cabal with other people to put other people down illegitimately? What is it like when you found yourself running off towards something thoughtlessly and you just get engaged in something that turns out to be very foolish? What happens when you get caught in what you thought was an innocent lie that might protect yourself and even others from a situation, but turns out to be much more awful in the long run? And what is it like when you realize that you've been angry with your family or a group of people and you told a piece of gossip or you made something up that was untrue just to hurt somebody, and you realize that that hurt actually landed and the family is in distress, or whatever, your friends, a group of friends or colleagues at work or whatever. What is that like? And this is what this chapter is certainly talking about as much as the external behavior. It's recognizing not that we should never do these things, because we all do, but what do we do about these kinds of experiences when we have them? When I was an EFM mentor, we had a process called theological reflection, and somebody would bring in a very succinct vignette, a small vignette story from their life, and they would describe in that vignette what the feelings and thoughts were in the moment that they were talking about. And let's say, I remember one that had to do with trying to find a parking space, and it didn't work out very well or whatever. And so the person tells the story, unpacks what they were thinking and feeling at the time. And then for the group to get on board with that, the important thing is for the group to be able to identify with those thoughts and feelings. So we go around the group and we say, when did you have that combination of thoughts and feelings? The important thing is not to go around the group and say, what was it like for you to park a car in an awkward situation? Because that would lead to, however many members of the group having different thoughts and feelings about it, because the circumstances would be different for each person. Where we met as a group was recognizing that I had this feeling of fear and frustration, say, in all sorts of places, so that we're aware that we share this experience of, say, fear and frustration. And that is what this chapter is trying to get at in the book of Proverbs. What is it like when your behavior has left you feeling hurt, betrayed by yourself, a little scared about how to take the next step? What to do when you feel yourself cornered? Or there's a whole ripple effect to some behavior of yours that you weren't expecting, but that's coming back to you almost in a tidal wave that creates for you anxiety, fear, and hurt. That's what this is talking about. And you can read it as, of course, if you've experienced that, it might be wise to avoid it in the future. In other words, to learn from your experience. However, what is the hardest part of this for a soulful person is to recognize at the end of the chapter, and it's not the end of the thinking, because the author of Proverbs did not divide it into chapters and verses, but at the end of this chapter, as it turns out, we have really a reflection of recognizing that it's not just our own conscience that puts us in this awkward situation. It's not the fear of how other people will react as the truth comes to the surface. It's really also an experience of recognizing that we're out of sorts with God. That God knows that there are ugly things and difficult things and challenging things and painful things and frightening things that happen to us. And God is always full of compassion. But we will feel the divine recognition that this is ugly, difficult, problematic. And we're right back to the problem of Adam and Eve. They ate from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. They didn't eat from the tree of good and evil. It's the knowledge of it. It's the fact that we cannot go through life without our everyday selves recognizing when we've done something good or something good has come our way, or when we've done something problematic and that problem comes back at us. And this is just truth. And the problem was that Adam and Eve couldn't live with that truth in the presence of God. And that's why it ends with this concept that the husband will be furious if you've had an affair with his wife. Because that's our soulful reality, that we will feel this awareness that we have stepped outside of how the divine would prefer to see life unfold. Not that the divine isn't aware of it, and by the way, not that behind that disappointment and discouragement and the recognition that this is ugly and challenging and difficult and that you might be the cause of this ugliness, God will never not be wide awake to that. And that's what feels so horrendous and judgmental. But that behind that reality is absolute compassion. And that's one of the insights of the soul. The soul will always experience God as God is. God is not mushy. If you've stepped out and caused pain for yourself or others, it's not as though God is going to say, oh, that doesn't matter. It didn't really happen. It's not so bad. That's not how God is. God will say, you have caused pain for yourself and others. And that just feels so horrendous for us. We get so protected against wanting to hear that because of that, we miss the compassion that comes behind it. So as we enter into deep soulful awareness, and as we get deeper and deeper, we get closer and closer to this experience of God. And quite often people do report a feeling of fear as they get closer and closer to their deep self. And that fear is this basic fear that we know we have wasted much of the energy of our life, gone astray in a great many ways, etc., etc. And God does not shield us from that truth. At the same time, God is always offering absolute compassion and a guiding and desiring hand to welcome us into the deep truth of our lives and how we can live them deeper and richer every day. So give that some thought. Take a look at chapter 6 yourself if you'd like, and we'll see if we can move on and continue to ever deepen how we experience the soulful life through the book of Proverbs, and see it not only as a story of how to behave on the outside, but to see what's happening inside. Thanks for listening. Have a blessed week.